Alright guys, what is happening? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for joining me again. And today, yes, the Escort is still here, obviously, because it ain't going anywhere with no wheels on it, but we are not working on that. Today, I'm actually going to be changing the front brake pads on the FJ Cruiser. It's not Supercharge It Day, unfortunately, yet. But before I get stuck into that, I want to tell you and kind of show you what happened this morning. So, with the Escort, as you guys know, spent an incredibly long time in the UK, and things get rusted and kind of corroded on and so on and so forth. And this is the tie rod end for obviously the steering rack. And this is the bolt, or the nut even, sorry, that, you know, holds it in place when you adjust it for like wheel alignments and all that kind of stuff. Now, what happened was this was stuck on and it wasn't really going anywhere, and I'd used penetrant spray, I'd heated it up with a blowtorch, I'd used freeze and release, and no matter what I did, I couldn't get it off. So I rang a guy, a mobile mechanic, and I paid him to come in and take it off. Because I live in the middle of nowhere, it cost me a freaking fortune. But here's what happened. He comes in, he says, which side is the problem side? I showed him this side. And he put a spanner on the end of this one, which I had done as well, by the way. And he put a spanner on the end of this one, tapped it with a hammer, again, which I had done, and it came off. It, like, you know, because he tapped it this way, so it released off the back end of the tie rod here, the connection, and it broke free. And then he got his mole grips on this and tapped it, and then this came off. And guys, he was here literally working on the car for about 2.5 minutes. We actually spent more time talking about the car than he did working on it. And he said, I thought you said you tried this. I said, bro, I have been at that for 3 days with a heat gun, penetrant spray, freeze and release. I've tried it all and I just gave up, and I thought, screw it. I'm gonna phone some guy and get someone else to do it. And he was like, I've seen this before. You won't believe me, but you definitely loosened it for me. So next time your missus says, I can't open the jar of peanut butter, and then you open it, and she says, oh, well, I just loosened it for you, maybe it's true. I don't know. Anyway, cue the intro and let's get stuck into the front brake pads on the Toyota FJ Cruiser.
Now I gotta ride or die.
We are gonna crack off the wheel nuts first before I jack it up. Got a huge jack there. I am gonna use the bash plate underneath it to jack it up on. I've used that bash plate before. It is 3 mil thick steel. It's pretty hefty, it's pretty thick, does the job. And you should chock the rear of your car. It's pretty windy today. Should chock the rear of your car. I don't have a chock, but I do have this wheel off my Ranger Raptor that got wrote off about 6 months ago. You guys probably remember that video. So I'm gonna shove you down on time lapse, gonna put some cool music on in the background for me, and I'm gonna voice over this video and tell you guys what I do changing the brakes on my FJ Cruiser. All right guys, so we're gonna crack the wheel nuts off before we jack the vehicle up because, well, to be quite honest, pretty damn difficult to crack the wheel nuts off if the wheels are off the ground, especially the front ones because they're not connected to the handbrake. So do that and then you can take your wheel nuts off. I always like to put my wheel underneath the car somewhere that is going to catch the vehicle if the vehicle falls off the jack. I would use axle stands, but my axle stands are currently in use underneath the Escort. Now, there's two pins at the top and bottom of the caliper, and I'm just spraying them with a little bit of freeze and release. These are what actually hold the brake pad inside of the caliper, and they remove from inside of the vehicle out towards you. First off, I'm just going to remove this little spring clip. All this spring clip does is apply a small amount of pressure to the pads to stop them from sticking against the disc. So I've just removed that, but I cannot remove it completely yet because I need to take the bottom pin out of the caliper. Now, behind the caliper, these pins are held in place by tiny little clips that kind of look a little bit like the same clips that you'd get on an RC car body, like those hobby grade ones. I just used some long nose pliers to pull them out, and they actually came out really, really easy. I was very happy with that. So the bottom one came out super easy. Now I'm going to take the top one out, and the top one comes out just as easy as the bottom one. In fact, I think it was actually a little bit easier. All I'm going to do now is grab my punch and my little rubber orange fluorescent mallet thing, and I'm just going to punch out the little stays or the little rods that keep the pads inside of the caliper. Again, both bottom and top on mine, on both sides actually, came out really easily, and I was very happy with that. Sometimes they can be a little bit stiff if they've been in there for quite a long period of time. However, I did buy this vehicle off Toyota, and they replaced the brake rotors, but not the pads before I bought it. Silly them. Now that those pins are out, I'm just going to crack off the bleed nipple, and you can see that my bleed nipple is actually connected to a full bleed kit. No, I'm not bleeding the brakes, but I will explain later on in the video why I'm actually doing this, because I did get quite a lot of hate on TikTok and YouTube Shorts for doing it this way, but I kind of think that people just comment before they think sometimes, you know what I mean? All I'm doing now is I'm just pushing the caliper back. Well, I say caliper, but I'm actually pushing the piston back using a clamp. This is going to make it much easier for me to get the pad out. So the video hasn't frozen. I paused it at my end because I wanted to explain what's going on here in this segment of the video. Because like I said, I did get a fair bit of hate on the Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, and the TikTok doing it this way. But like I said, people comment without really thinking these days. So Toyota overfilled the system by filling it all the way to the max line when they replaced the brake fluid with really low brakes. What they should have done is only filled it to the minimum, so that way I could have just pushed the piston back in the caliper and had no real problems. And this does tend to happen quite a lot. This is the 4th or 5th car that I've had to do this on in the last 10 years. So if this ever happens to you, all you're going to do is clamp off your flexi line. You can see that orange clamp there with the arrow pointing to it on the flexi line, and that's going to stop any brake fluid from coming back up into the system. Then connect your bleed kit to the bleed nipple. Crack the bleed nipple off and then push your pistons back. All this is going to do is it's going to push the excess fluid that's now inside the caliper, is going to push it out down this little clear line all the way into the little bottle that you see magneted to my chassis rail. Now there's absolutely zero chance of any air getting in the brake system doing it this way because, well, there was no air in there to start with. And as you can see, the brake fluid only came out. I didn't pull the piston out of the caliper and suck any brake fluid or any air back into the caliper, so I've absolutely no idea what these people are talking about. So just going to be using my clamp to push the pads out on the other side as well. I'm going to push it out at the bottom where there's one piston, and then I'm going to push them out at the top as well where there is another piston. So this has 2 pistons on each side. This type of caliper, 4 pistons in total. I always get confused with, would you call this a 2-piston caliper or would you call it a 4-piston caliper? I personally would call it a 4-piston. So brake pads come out really easy. I was very happy with that. If yours have been in for a long time, you may need to tap them with a hammer just to loosen them off. But like I said, mine have been out because Toyota replaced the disc before I bought the car. Now the new pads do slide straight in. So I just went and got a little bit of abrasive paper, and all I'm going to do is just clean off these pins a little bit just to get all the dirt and crud off them to help them go back in the caliper a little bit easier so I don't have to smash them around with the hammer. Once I've cleaned them off, you'll see that I give them a wipe off with the cloth and then I apply a little bit of copper grease to them just to help them slide in, and the copper grease is anti-seize as well, so it just stops the risk of them seizing in there if for whatever reason I need to take them out again in the near future, but that's highly unlikely. So just apply your copper grease, really thin layer. You don't want to go crazy with the amount that you apply, and then slide the pins back in. You want to make sure that it slides in one side of the caliper, through the hole in the pad, and then through the hole in the pad on the other side, and through the hole in the caliper on the other side. Once you've done that, clean off the other pin, do exactly the same thing, apply a very thin, small, not very generous layer of copper grease, and then apply the pin in the bottom. But remember, when you are putting the pin back in the bottom, that you do need to put in the little clip that I took out earlier, this little spring clip that looks like the letter A. That goes in before you put the pin in, because the pin actually holds it in place. And you can see me doing that now. And then I'll just slide the pin through the caliper, making sure that I'm going through one side of the caliper, and then through one pad, and through the other pad, and then through the other side of the caliper. Because my caliper seemed to be in pretty good nick and not too badly corroded, both top and bottom pins seem to go in really, really easily. Mega surprised. In fact, this is probably the easiest brake pad change I've ever done, including the brake pad changes that I did on the 5th generation Toyota Supra. Now, you can see, again, I'm going to reiterate that there is no air getting into my braking system. Yes, the bleed valve is still cracked, but the bleeder kit now forms part of my sealed unit, because you can see that the bleed valve, coming off the bleed valve, is the clear pipe, and you can see that that clear pipe is still full of brake fluid. Now, the last thing I'm going to do is clip that clip in and then redo up the bleed valve, just nip it up, and then I can remove the bleed kit or the little clear hose, and I'm good to go. And there we go, just tightening it up. Pretty straightforward, guys. I really don't understand why there was so much hate on TikTok over this method. It's pretty straightforward, but I guess because it's maybe a little bit out of the box, I don't know, people just scared of something that's different. All you do now, just remove everything. So your little clip on the flexi line, see it's not damaged. Remove your little bleeder kit, take the magnet off. Don't forget to put your wheel back on though before you let the car back down on the ground. Hopefully that's common sense for all you guys and girls. And torque settings on the FJ Cruiser are only 112 Newton meters, which I personally thought were pretty low, but that's what Toyota says, so that's what we did. Make sure that you do, however, recheck your torque settings after around about 100 to 300 kilometers, just to make sure that your wheel doesn't fall off as you're driving down the road. All right, guys, again, thanks for watching. I appreciate you. If you're still here watching at the end, you must like what you see. So if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.